All right, time for the session that I know we're all big fans of, something we enjoy, really a chance to be able to highlight the incredible progress being made in CF research and care as well. We're going to spend time on that. So in a moment, I'm going to introduce our panelists and go through some of their details, and they're going to provide some insight into those exciting efforts. We're going to take the questions at the end of the presentation. Please submit those questions. Look forward to getting as many as we can. We may not get to everyone, but we're going to try. And so I'm now pleased to introduce my distinguished colleagues. And if you could go ahead and join me on stage, guys, I'll start introducing. So, yeah, thank you. So coming in first here is Dr. Steven Rowe, our fantastic Chief Scientific Officer. So many of you know about Steve's background. He joined the foundation in 2022, but had such a long history in cystic fibrosis, respected globally as a leader in CF research, brings more than 2 decades of experience to the role. He served, I don't know if you know this, but he's the principal investigator for the first triple combination therapy, Trikafta. So that was his work. Also has been involved with so many transformational milestones for the community. And as CSO, Steve oversees our basic and our clinical research and leads the foundation's research strategy, our venture philanthropy program investments, including the Path to a Cure work that we talked about earlier for developing new therapies for people with CF and eventually a cure. To his left, Dara Riva, who's worked at the CF Foundation since 2017. We're so glad to get her. She previously was a science officer at the congressionally directed medical research programs and also a research associate at the National Laboratory in Frederick, supporting the National Institutes for Allergy and Infectious Diseases. So a real expert in that area, has been leading much of the science grants work that we've been doing, as well as a lot of the clinical trials, working on Dr. J.P. Clancy's team. And there's a special reason why Dara's committed to this. So Dara is helping to find a cure because she has 2 kids with CF, Max and Penelope, who have visited the CF offices on occasion, by the way, and to remind us. And is also, Dara's really involved with the Maryland chapter, who I know is here in force. So, also thank her for her work as an advisor to the Hopkins CF Care Center. So, and then to the far left, Dr. Albert Faro, our newly announced, soon-to-be Chief Medical Officer at the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, who we talked about earlier. Al's background, did his biochemistry at Columbia University in New York, got his medical degree from Pittsburgh in 1988, did all of his training, including in pediatric residencies, pulmonary fellowships at the University of Pittsburgh. Joined the foundation in 2016, so been with us for quite a while, directing the CF Foundation initiatives related to care, particularly around improving the transplant journey for people with CF, some of the advanced quality improvement initiatives, the CF Care Network, all the things we're going to talk about today, so we're looking forward to that. So, Steve, maybe I'm going to start to invite you up first. If you want to kick us off, that would be great. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Mike. Really glad to join you. It's been an amazing week so far. It's one of our favorite weeks at the foundation to really get in touch with the mission and get in touch with you. And of course, this week so far has lived up to that. I'll tell you about a few cherries on top that I experienced. I started my week at home in my research laboratory, and I've worked with some amazing young scientists. And what we're doing is actually gene editing cells and then putting them into CF models to see if we can correct the problem, to try and bring the sorts of treatments that have been so successful in sickle cell disease to CF, and do that, bringing in new young scientists to the field. And then I turned my attention to really what's been my life's work, our translational read-through laboratory that works hand in hand with our Bedford laboratory at the CFFT lab to try and bring something to fruition, something that J.P. Clancy first brought me into the field of CF as we look at new molecules that induce translational read-through that we hope we can eventually bring to patients. Then I turned my attention to our amazing group in Bethesda at headquarters, where we worked on the strategic framework for curing CF, applying these new amazing CRISPR-Cas9 technologies that hadn't even been discovered 10 years ago, to try and cast the framework for how we're going to bring this to CF and bring this to fruition. And then I joined you here, downtown Washington, and heard about the incredible advocacy work that you did yesterday to celebrate those successes, and then think about how you've contributed directly to something that we think about every day at the foundation, and that is pushing our pipeline forward. Your contributions to pushing forward on the Pasteur Act, for example, are helping make progress in what you see in yellow, each of those representing a therapy in the anti-infective approach. One of the things that we do as a foundation, and my charge is to help see the big picture of these therapeutic development pipeline, and you can see that it is robust. It has 16 therapies already approved that are not on the chart, that are listed on top because they're already available to people with CF, a remarkable story, but also that it really separates into major categories. On the left, you can see what we're spending a lot of time and attention on, and that is the path to a cure space, shown in blue, and I'm going to detail that as I move throughout the slides today. But you should also see in this big picture scenario that we are very much focused on therapies that can help people with CF right now. In that anti-infective group that you worked on with the Pasteur Act, with other CFTR modulators shown in purple, and other supportive therapies in the other colors. You can see one of those bars in purple as we work on each one individually, trying to push it over the finish line, is almost there. Mike mentioned it earlier. It's the new triple combination therapy with vanzacaftor. Bonnie Ramsey put out, who will celebrate tomorrow, put out the press release that showed that this is now achieving something that has not been done before. More and more people now below the diagnostic range with this new triple combination therapy in sweat chloride test. And we really look forward to seeing what happens at the FDA as we get the expected result and make this available to people with CF. But we're not stopping there. Other therapies we are advancing at the CF Foundation and putting our major emphasis on to help them be successful include our $6.6 million investment into Sionna Therapeutics. And Sionna is developing another CFTR modulator therapy. That's why you also see it in purple. That is in the laboratory shown to be even more effective than what's already available in the form of Trikafta. And because it works on an entirely new mechanism of the inherent protein folding defect of the nucleotide binding domain 1 of CFTR, the important piece of CFTR that's broken for most people with CF, we also expect not only to be more efficacious, but that it to be work on mutations that are currently not covered by the current CFTR modulator regimens, expanding that number of people that can benefit. Separately, we also invested over $5 million in ClareMedix, which is using an entirely new technology to break up biofilms. Biofilms are what make bacteria stick around in the CF lung. And it's unique to the CF lung and other diseases where there's abnormalities of the lung that allow these infections to set forth. So one of the reasons that we were really excited about this is it's not just another antibiotic. It's developing an entirely new mechanism to help break up those biofilms and has the potential to help eradicate chronically infected lungs, people with CF that live with pseudomonas or other bacteria that form biofilms that ultimately become eradicated, especially when we think about combining that with CFTR modulators. I use this analogy of climbing Mount Everest a lot to my team and to you, our community, to think about where we stand in CF. In many ways, and as you've heard throughout the week already, and you'll hear more about today and tomorrow, we're the envy of many other diseases. We've accomplished so much together, starting with just that small band of families that committed to trying to help people and their children with CF. And but while we sit at the top or near the peak or near the top of the world, as in this picture of Everest, we also know that the highest part of the summit, achieving the summit, is yet another challenge. And just as in the climb, is actually the hardest part and the most dangerous part of the challenge. And we know that what we've done so far to get where we are will not be enough to achieve these next set of most challenging objectives, to ultimately generate a one-time cure for a disease, a genetic disease of the lung and beyond. So how are we trying to do this? Well, we're beginning with the end in mind, a phrase that our former CEO, Preston Campbell, used to often say, that we are now living on a day-to-day basis as we transform the way we try to bring new therapies to market and to availability for people with CF. In the past, of course, we relied much on the robust funding to help de-risk the development pathway for new therapies for CF. But now we're extending well beyond that. We're bringing our enormous laboratory experience, enormous expertise that we're developing in-house, and also, again, beginning with the end in mind and thinking about how new genetic therapy trials and studies will be needed in this new area of CF, so that we design the studies that are intended to prove that these ought to be beneficial and superior to what's currently available, so that those are designed correctly and we can conduct the most efficient studies so that we can act with that sense of urgency that Mike spoke of. And we know there'll be an intense filtering process, as you can see in the middle of the slide. Not all of these therapies that we're investing in, especially in the genetic space, which is a high-risk endeavor, will make it to people. But when they do, when we select the right ones and do the right filtering, we are also going to conduct the most efficient and targeted studies to date to try and bring genetic therapies home. Another way that we tend to think about this is how we're trying to deal with this dichotomy. The fact that we need to bring therapies for everyone, but also have this enormous challenge of developing in a space that hasn't been done yet. There hasn't been a genetic cure to a systemic disease yet, but we will be among the first. And that is because we are leading these sorts of transformative therapies in areas where there's high unmet need, like you heard about with biofilm disruption that might not otherwise covered. This is where we're bringing the full force of our capabilities, both financial support, but also the intellectual support we can bring in the research affairs team to the table, and our enormous academic collaborators across the nation and world, and the Therapeutics Development Network to bring those trials to fruition. But we're also keeping in mind that there's an entirely new landscape for many people with CF who are doing so much better with CFTR modulator therapy, and that's changing how we need to develop therapies like in the anti-infective space. So for traditional antibiotics or mucus-acting drugs or anti-inflammatories, we're now doing partnering in new ways, including other diseases that are we would call CF adjacent. They're much similar to CF, even though they're not CF per se, because we know that that will be the fastest way to bring a therapy and add it to the armamentarium of people with CF who need these sorts of supportive therapies going forward. Now, obviously, we've got enormous progress, and this slide depicts how many people can benefit now from CFTR modulators in yellow. But our initial focus as we think about those therapies that we're going to lead most forcefully in, genetic therapies of the lung, it's for people with nonsense mutations. It's for people with mutations that are currently not covered. It's been the focus of my career for over 20 years, and I can tell you for sure that we'll be starting with that group for many reasons. Many reasons because the unmet need is high. Many reasons because the ability to show that that is efficacious, that that can work, will be easier in that population. But that will ultimately be the form for us to bring to genetic treatment to everyone. So how are we going to do this? Number one is our investments are as robust as ever. We're now working with corporate entities and academic entities that are working in the gene addition space, gene editing space, and delivery vehicle space that all have to be combined to ultimately deliver a genetic therapy to the lung. And we're also doubling down in translational read-through and other splice corrective technologies for these rare unmet need mutations where CFTR modulators are less likely to pose a benefit. And of course, we're doing this also by investing in the tools and technologies that help make this all more facile. And you can see in each of these cases, we have a half dozen or so investments and partnerships that we're leading in to get to that number that Mike mentioned earlier of 50 genetic technologies that we're partnering with. a really remarkable number, and why we're developing a huge team, a very effective team to help shepherd those, especially those that we find most promising. Well, the genetic therapy era is actually upon us in CF. And of course, you've read the stories where people have genetic cause of blindness and can take a single injection of a genetic therapy into their eye and be able to read the newspaper at the end of the day. We also have seen sickle cell therapies become approved for a very rare and untreated condition, which is remarkable. Well, now we're going to work on developing that sort of genetic therapy for people with CF, and that era is now. You can see that we have 3 different mRNA technologies, the same technologies that developed COVID vaccines and have been so helpful for many. We're now bringing to CF and enrolling not only normal volunteers, but now, in many cases, people with CF that are all projected to begin this year or have already started just in the last few months. Also, antisense oligonucleotide and splice therapy that works for a specific rare mutation uncovered by CF, but could open up to other mutations of that sort with a genetic technology that can be delivered to the lung. And also gene addition therapy with our colleagues at 4D Molecular and with a study that's led by somebody sitting in the front row of the room, Dr. Jennifer Taylor-Kauser, who's developing a gene addition therapy to the lung that can work agnostic of CFTR mutations and is now entering the largest genetic therapy study to date in CF. We also have a remarkable preclinical pipeline as shown here that is reaching the point where we're beginning to think about clinical studies with all of those. At the same time, we're still thinking about the future. Again, thinking about that amazing CRISPR-Cas9 discovery that resulted in the Nobel Prize just 10 years ago that showed that gene editing can be applied to many genetic diseases, and deciding with the full thrust of our authority and our will and your spirit to find the best partners to bring that forward. And one of those that I'm really excited to announce is Prime Medicine, a company that was formed out of the Nobel laureate from the CRISPR-Cas9 discovery that can is intended to pursue gene editing in CF and has multiple technologies, some that can apply right now for the rarest mutations in CF, but those that are uncovered by modulators in relatively small studies, but also promises to expand to insert the entire CF gene into the permanent DNA, ultimately resulting in a permanent cure. Again, following that pipeline from first individuals and then the group, all of you with family members for people with CF. Finally, reaching this summit is going to require enormous effort, and why we're building our team and why we rely on you to support our cause. Of course, that includes continued funding for our academic research portfolio, because many of the next discoveries we cannot predict despite our best planning. Again, we've already cited that those sorts of discoveries that have happened just 10 or 20 years ago that are completely transformed the way we think about curing CF. The CF Foundation efforts in our own laboratory and beyond, where we're trying to show these therapies work and and which we need to emphasize most and prioritize for clinical trials. How developing those hand in hand with our partners in our CF Foundation laboratory, and then ultimately testing in our therapeutics development network as we bring these forward to ultimately get to the summit of a genetic cure. So that's what's going on. We are quite busy. I just shared a little bit of a week and a little bit of a year's effort. And to hear more of the efforts of training our next population of researchers and how they're impacting the clinical research environment, I invite my colleague, Dara Riva.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you, Steve.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dara Riva, and thank you so much for letting me tell you about the important work we're doing in CF complications. So I have to say I was a little nervous today. When Mike said, hey, how about doing the panel about research updates, I was like, me? And then I heard I was going to be sat between Dr. Steve Rowe and Dr. Albert Faro. And then I have to say I got a little nervous at that point. But then I had a lot of friends in the room remind me, who am I speaking to? And this is my community. And I have met so many of you over the past years as we attend VLC together and March on the Hill together. And I follow so many of you on social media, and I'm able to celebrate your wins and pray with you for the lows. So really, I'm just talking to my friends, right? And thanks. I'm talking to all 600 of my friends at one time. So I have the pleasure today to talk about some of the research we're doing in CF complications. And we know, everybody knows in this room, CF complications can really be what brings us down in life, which really can cause a lot of burden and can be the challenges we face every day with this disease. And we also know that Trikafta is not a cure, and we have to continue to fight to address these challenges, not only for those who are on Trikafta, but those who don't have the options to take modulators, even if they have, whether it's because of mutations or because they can't tolerate it for some reason. So a little personal story. My kids have been very fortunate to be able to take Trikafta. They started it July 7th, 2021. That is my date, I will always remember. And unfortunately, about 2 years into that, my son started to develop CFRD. And I knew I should have brought tissues because what have I learned over the years about coming to VLC without tissues? Anyway, we weren't expecting this. We weren't expecting him to have to start insulin after starting Trikafta. It was quite a blow because I had gotten pretty comfortable in our new CF world, and I wasn't even thinking about these complications anymore. But he started insulin, and it just really opened my eyes again for the importance of this work, of addressing these CF complications, again, for everybody that has cystic fibrosis. So today I'm going to talk about some of those CF complications in endocrine, mental health, and sexual reproductive health. I have no disclosures except that I'm going to try not to cry today. So let's talk about the endocrine system. What do I mean by that? So the endocrine system is responsible for creating and releasing hormones in the body. So if you can imagine all of the hormones that you have in your body right now, you can imagine how many things this could affect, like the way your body regulates blood sugars, your growth and nutrition, and reproductive organs. One of the most common complications is CFRD, with more than 30% of adults living with CFRD. And again, that's caused by the way a person with CF creates and releases hormones like insulin from their pancreas. Currently, we have two very important questions we're going to try to tackle with CFRD. First, we need to understand how is CFRD developed, and not only in just people who are taking Trikafta, but also, very importantly, those that do not have access to those modulators. If we were able to really pinpoint how it's developed, potentially we could find ways to prolong the development or even prevent it. Things as simple as maybe changing your diet or changing the way you exercise. The second really important question we want to understand is, what are those long-term complications that people with CF living with CFRD face every day? Long-term complications can affect the kidneys, the eyes, blood vessels, many other things. And as the CF population grows and ages, and we have more adults living with cystic fibrosis, we need to ensure we're prepared to help them face the long-term CFRD challenges. I do want to give another shout out to Bruce. One of our greatest achievements at the CF Foundation was our patient registry. Not only has that helped us develop the best care model in the world, but it has also enabled researchers to learn more about the CF population and identify those areas of unmet need. For instance, that statistic I just gave you, more than 30% of adults living with CFRD, that came from the patient registry. So thanks to everybody for contributing to that. We're trying to create something very similar, but with data from endocrine complications. We're hoping that we can create this database and then be able to share this data with other researchers, allowing them also to use this data in their projects. This is very similar to how the CF registry works, right? CF patient registry works with researchers now. Currently, we're working on inputting data from CF-funded clinical research programs, but it is going to collect numerous endocrine-related measures And again, hoping to really advance our science and research into endocrine complications so we can maybe potentially prolong or possibly prevent the development of CFRD, how and when to screen for it, how to when to treat it, learn more about growth and nutrition in the population, and again, really start to bring our researchers together to work on this problem together and quicker. So in 2019, the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation initiated a comprehensive effort to identify the focus areas of future research in mental health, and especially focusing on the priorities of the community. We conducted a large national survey of providers and community members to try to understand those priorities, and then we convened a mental health research workshop bringing in those providers, clinicians, researchers, and community members to really define what we need to start working on. We had an opportunity to bring additional folks together to form this mental health research working group called PRIME, and their goal really is to build the strategy for advancing mental health research and addressing, again, the community's priorities here. Over the next years, the team's going to work on several projects across the spectrum of community research priorities, including depression and mood disorders, anxiety, medical trauma, and also, importantly, the relationship between modulators and changes in behavior and mental health. So with Trikafta, we had a little bit of a baby boom, and we also learned that Trikafta is going to be very impactful and important as people continue to make life decisions on marriage and growing a family. In 2018, we had a very smart group of CF pulmonologists, thank you, Jennifer Taylor-Kauser, come to the foundation and really help us understand that there are major gaps in research in this area. And with that, we were able to create the CF sharing workshop. And really, their work is around family planning, reproductive health, gender research in both men and women living with CF. This group is, again, multidisciplinary and also includes community members and RCs and pulmonologists and OBGYNs, a group of people who don't normally work together in CF. So it's really lovely to see this group come together and tackle this as one. Some of their currently funded projects is HOPE CF, which I want to mention is also co-funded by the NIH. And with that, they hope to understand the impact of parenthood on both the mental and physical health of the mothers, and also the spouses, the dads as well. We also have another study called Mayflowers, and that is observing mothers with CF who are taking Trikafta during their pregnancies. This is going to teach us a lot about the impact of modulators while pregnant. So I mentioned earlier, Trikafta is not a cure, and while it seems Trikafta has changed CF infections for the better, we still have a great need for new anti-infectives. While this graph from the 2022 patient registry, again, shout out Dr. Marshall, this report looks very promising, but we have not wavered in our drive to fight CFF infections. I want to make sure that you guys take home message. We are not going to stop with those anti-infectives. Steve showed some of the anti-infectives on the CFF drug development pipeline, but I wanted to take an opportunity here to show you a little bit about what our academic researchers are working on. So many of you may remember at the 2022 NACFC plenary, Dr. Natalie West spoke about the STOP program. The STOP program was developed to help standardize the treatment of pulmonary exacerbations. Research so far has shed light on finding the right duration for when people should take IV antibiotics. But we currently have 2 new STOP program studies getting started right now. First, STOP 360 is looking at 1 IV antibiotic during inpatient stays versus 2 IV antibiotics. Oftentimes, that second antibiotic is IV Toby, or an aminoglycoside, which we know can cause hearing loss and is very harsh on the kidneys. Learning if 1 IV antibiotic is just as good as 2, then maybe we could eliminate that Toby. So this research is really going to help us define how to treat pulmonary exacerbations. Stop Peds is also a new project that we have going on, and it is really going to be focusing on learning how to treat treat increased respiratory symptoms in children like, when you have a cough and you call your center and you say, my child has a new cough, and oftentimes they're given oral antibiotics, but we want to know, do we need to do those oral antibiotics? Or is there a way to do some tailored therapy without oral antibiotics at home that can get your child better just as well? So this study is going to enroll patients who have a new cough, and they're either going to be started on oral antibiotics immediately, or they're going to be sent home with a tailored therapy and monitored very closely. The first pilot showed very positive results, stating that we could potentially do this, but this follow-up study is really going to provide us more data on whether or not oral antibiotics are needed when there is an increase of respiratory symptoms in children. Both of these studies are in their very early days, so it will take some time to get some results. Oh, I think I have one. Sorry. 1 second. And then I also wanted to mention detection. We know that with Trikafta, we are seeing a little less sputum on demand. So when you go to clinic, you might not be able to give that sputum, but maybe at home you can. Maybe after exercising you can. But we want to look at novel ways to detect microorganisms without sputum. And particularly, we're looking at this in blood, urine, and breath. And all of this seems like it's going to be very much in the future, detecting microorganisms from somebody breathing in a tube. But I want to point out that during the pandemic, the FDA actually approved a breath detection method to help detect and diagnose COVID-19. So this technology is closer than we think. And then with that, I'm going to pass it on to Dr. Albert Faro.
Thank you, Dara. That was spectacular. With Dara at the helm, all those complications have to be on the run. So thank you all. For all of you who've come up with warm well wishes and your support, I can't tell you how much that means. So I'm very grateful as Clinical Affairs transitions from a transformative and legendary leader in Bruce to our new state. So thank you all for that. So I'm going to be speaking to you today on care, and I'm going to zero in on 3 specific areas. This is my disclosure statement. So in 2016, the CEF Foundation embarked on an initiative focused on lung transplantation. And it has grown, as you can see from this slide, to encompass all aspects of advanced lung disease, including lung transplantation. Now, when we started the initiative, we planned to achieve our goals to improve care and longer-term outcomes for people with CF with advanced lung disease by first bringing together a group of some of the largest lung transplant programs in North America who were ready to begin to work together to move us from single-center studies so that we could make some real progress. This consortium has served as a nucleus for identifying best practices and standardizing approaches, because we heard loud and clear from the community that it was a bit of a wild, wild west out there, where it mattered so that we could move forward and improve care. And the consortium would also serve as a research network, beginning with the sharing of data in a lung transplant registry, married to biosamples collected at routine and clinically indicated transplant visits. And we have partnered with the Cleveland Clinic, where those samples are stored in a biorepository. Now, this opened in May of 2021. So some of you have heard this before. It's always been a dream of mine. And we have over 900 patients enrolled at this time. From the figure on the slide, you can also see that there are many additional activities and work we support in this endeavor. And I just want to highlight our efforts in palliative care and recognize how it is part of the holistic care that we deliver in cystic fibrosis, And it is not just end-of-life care. We've published a guideline around CF and palliative care, and we are presently working on a guideline for pain management for people with cystic fibrosis. Now, again, I could give an entire lecture for hours on advanced lung disease and lung transplantation. Suffice it to say, we are focused on finding improvements for those who choose or choose not to pursue transplant. Now, some of you may be asking, Al, but we've seen a marked reduction in the number of people with CF who require lung transplant. And in fact, the data would validate that. Here you can see data from the United Network for Organ Sharing. And in CF, we were doing about 250 lung transplants per year in this country. And then, as the saying goes, a funny thing happened on the way to the forum. In our case, it was Trikafta, which I will call by ETI moving forward during my presentation, a highly effective CFTR modulator therapy. It was introduced in late 2019, and you can see the marked reduction beginning in 2020. And as of January 15th, the United Network for Organ Sharing has reported 50 transplants were done in people with CF in 2023. 1/5 the number that we had in the past. And it's not because there are fewer lung transplants occurring. In fact, there were 3,000 lung transplants done in this country last year, a record. It's because people with CF are doing so much better in many cases that they were able to come off the waiting list and are too well to be transplanted. And the Lung Transplant Initiative, though, highlights and underscores, and I don't think there's anyone in this crowd that I have to convince, but to highlight that no one left behind is not just a slogan. It's our very essence at the foundation and as a community. Now, on this slide, what we can see is that for those with advanced lung disease, and this is data we've collected in our advanced lung disease registry, those who were able to go on ETI, represented by the blue line, saw a substantial increase in lung function of 6 to 7% in their FEV1. Unfortunately, those with advanced lung disease who are not on ETI, represented in orange, have seen over the several years a 6% decline in lung function. We are here until it is done for everyone. And underlining this commitment, up to this point, since 2016, between research and clinical activities for the Advanced Lung Disease Initiative, we have invested over $60 million in that effort. So a key take-home point is if you invite Al out on a date, he ain't cheap. Now, I want to touch on CF newborn screening. Universal screening was implemented in 2010 in the US. Unfortunately, there isn't a universal approach to screening. It's not a federal national program. We have 50 states, and the last time we looked, there were 39 different algorithms to do newborn screening. Now, do you really think they could all perform equally well? Well, the answer is obviously no. Newborn screening works by testing a baby's blood, as you can see on that picture, to see a couple of things, and one of them includes to see whether the baby carries one of the more common CF mutations. The problem is that people of color are more likely to carry rare mutations that do not appear on a state screening panel. The result is that these babies do not equitably benefit from newborn screening nationwide. This work is important because people of color with CF face significant health disparities, including delays in diagnosis, decreased access to relevant information on CF, quality and delivery of medical treatments, and inclusion in the CF community. But you don't need me to talk about this. Let's hear what the CF community itself has said. And I'm going to just read a couple of these. You can read them yourselves too. I was diagnosed in 1995. I was 2.5 years old, and I almost was dead before I was diagnosed. The reason was because of my father's side, and they said Hispanics can't have CF. For those of you who were here last night, you heard a very moving story and perspective from someone in our Hispanic population. I know that we have come a long way with medications and research for specific mutations, but when is it our turn? How long do we have to wait? Addressing these issues is one of our top priorities at the Foundation. We've developed an initiative and mapped out our steps for newborn screening. We've brought together a steering committee to help develop guidelines and define current best practices for CF newborn screening. We have funded multiple rounds of Screening Improvement Program awards and will fund more in 2024. We've defined the roles and the responsibilities of center directors around newborn screening. And we are, in partnership with Mary and the policy team, developing an advocacy strategy to effectively partner with state lab directors. And in that vein, I'm honored to report that for 2 years in a row, we have attended the newborn screening conference and presented on behalf of CF. And just very recently, I believe Mary gave an interview for the New York Times piece. So we are out there and advocating. Now, I know everyone is talking about the care model, and that's probably the most common question I receive. I just want to remind everyone that the current CF care model is tried and true. It has served people with CF well for decades and a model for other chronic diseases. And it's never been static. It's always been evolving. Now, on the surface, it's sort of those 4 clinic visits per year, the PFTs, the nutritional evaluations, the airway cultures, and more. But when you probe deeper, the care model is so much more than that. It includes evidence-based care driven by data and guidelines, delivered holistically with a focus on the person, not just the lungs or the GI tract, resulting in co-production of care within the framework of trusting relationships. These are essential components that we not only want to retain, but we need to continue to grow and improve. And we have programs at the Foundation that are helping care teams and people with CF do just that. Still, the clinical canvas is changing rapidly for many who benefit from ETI. And we need to reassess if our brushstrokes of CF care delivery are still appropriate for some. Dr. Whitney Brown and others at the Foundation are leading an effort that will result in moving our understanding forward. It really started in 2022 when we funded 7 different studies looking at telehealth, remote monitoring, and we're excited. We believe we'll see early data and results presented at NACFC in Boston later this year. Then late last year, we shared a survey on the Adapting CF Care Survey. We shared it with both care providers and with the community. And I'm happy to report we received over 1,300 responses, about half and half for both groups. And for those of you that participated, a big, big thank you. We're going through that data now, and it's helping to inform our future steps, including work on 2 guidance documents that will probably be released for public comment next week. So please keep a lookout, looking at frequency of visits, the structure of care teams, and we look forward to hearing your input and feedback. And then lastly, we hope to have those published later in the year, and then with the partnership of the CF Learning Network and the teams, the care teams that are in the CF Learning Network, begin to test some of those directives, guidance, some of that guidance, to see what works and how we can tailor it to work better for all. So this is just the tip of the iceberg of the activities around care, and yet I hope it gives you a flavor of how your support continues to transform the landscape for people with CF, continuing to improve on the delivery of the best, high-quality, specialized care in medicine so that all people with CF have the opportunity to lead long, fulfilling lives. Thank you. And with that, I think it's time for some questions.
Time for questions. Right? Exactly right. Thank you, guys. Well, thank you. A great start. And we've covered the college lecture part now, which was fantastic. Let's do questions now, where we sort of really dive in deep. Please submit questions. I can see them submitted here, which is great. I'm going to start with my own question, though, because people are going to go home and they're going to be asked, what did you hear that's really exciting? What's the new thing? So I'm going to ask each of you to talk about something that you're particularly excited about over the next year or two. So in the near future, that you say, hey, I'm particularly excited about this in my area.
Yep.
So maybe we'll start with Steve, move to the left. Give Al a little more time to think about his answer.
Sounds good. Well, thanks, Mike. One is a really easy answer. I mean, in heart, I'm a translational scientist. I'm a physician scientist and love to see that first test of something in a person that looks like it might work in the lab and bring it to people. And that's now here. That's happening, as I mentioned in the slide. And so we have now 3 programs in mRNA, plus another program that's delivering a shortened version of CFTR, but still one packaged in a virus that can deliver to the lung. And all of those in aggregate are now getting to enough people that we can start to make some conclusions. We can start to get a picture of what might happen. So that'll evolve because these studies are done slowly, carefully. But over the course of the next 12 months, the next year, I think we'll have a real good idea of whether this technology that's worked to give us a vaccine, but has a much tougher task, delivering enough of a functional protein for enough time to the right cells to be to ultimately reverse the disease. I remember so well that first patient with G551D when they got ivacaftor. I remember it like this. And I could tell you every detail about that. And what I'm looking for is to see in aggregate. Also, I remember that point where we got the first aggregate data where we saw the sweat chloride and said, oh, this is for real. And so I hope is that by the end of the year, we'll have enough of this coming together to know if we're on the board or not. That's one. I do want to mention another.
2, great, I love it.
I do want to mention another. Is that okay, Dara?
Actually, one of the things I have to say is, and that RNA, it doesn't matter what mutation you have, right? That's for everybody.
Right. That's right. Also true for the AAV.
The AAV, yep.
And so the other one, and I tried to mention at the end, and of course we have a lot of different investments in genetic therapy companies, but one of the ones that we've just had for and announced is our collaboration with Prime Medicine. And let me tell you why I'm excited about that in general. Number one is it's part of our new approach. We're not just looking for genetic technology companies to come to us anymore. We're going out and finding them. And this is one we thought had a technology that could apply not just for the people with CF that need it right now, but ultimately get to the cure, and that they had a plan to use that as a bridge to get there. We also had a careful look at the technical details of what they're doing with their CRISPR technology to know that the rates and efficiencies they're seeing in the laboratory look like it's going to hit the mark for what we need for CF. And then third, this is a team of people that have been in CF before. Many of them actually had their roots with Aurora and Vertex. And so they know what it's like to develop a drug in CF. And so that culmination is one that we're going to be excited about. We're going to lean in on. Our team is gearing up to really help them in a number of ways.
I love it. So everybody got their two science ones, particularly exciting. Dara, you want to add?
Yeah,
you get two as well. Everybody gets two if you want it. If you want it.
So, of course, I'm very excited about CEDAR-CF. That's that data repository where we're hoping to get all of our research in one space where people can use that data, share that data, and really advance our research and knowledge of CFRD. Currently, a lot of the research we funded have been single center or very small studies in CFRD, and it really hasn't pushed us towards the goal of figuring out CFRD as a complication. So I'm really excited that we're finally getting all of the great brains together and then hopefully really be able to speed up what we learn about CFRD. So that's one. The second one is our mental health research working group. I think nothing breaks my heart more than to hear of somebody who could take Trikafta because of their mutations, but have to stop because they feel that they are having changes in their behavior or changes in their mental health. This is a groundbreaking drug, and to just have that right out of your reach is heartbreaking. So I'm really excited that this group is going to start tackling this question. It's a great group of psychiatrists, psychologists. We have basic science researchers helping us to understand CFTR in the brain, and also community members. With no surprise, I strive to have community members on every single project that we have. And we constantly are reaching out to Community Voice and others that may not be part of Community Voice yet to come and join our working groups, come join our research working groups and our workshops, and help us prioritize what is important to you. So, small plug, if you're not a member of Community Voice, please join ASAP. And if you have a friend or know somebody who's not part of Community Voice, please direct them to the website to sign up because your voice seriously matters.
Thank you, Dara. Thank you. Two there as well. Great. Yep. Dr. Faro, what are you excited about?
I've got a couple too. So first, certainly assessing the care model and making sure that we're meeting the needs of all people with CF, as I pointed out. One thing I didn't have time to mention is we are assessing also the components of the team and probably be thinking about how we expand the CF care team even further to make sure that we have the expertise and we're addressing the needs of people with CF. In tandem with that, this is actually a big year of transformation in clinical affairs. In addition to the care model, we are re-platforming the registry, which, as Dara pointed out earlier, really is a crown jewel. It's a model for so many others, yet it sits on data technology. And very, very excited to have the opportunity that a new platform will provide us to bring in additional streams of data that we've never been able to do before, including better integration with electronic medical records, including establishing a patient portal within a few years that would hopefully allow for data from wearable devices, home spirometry, other home monitoring, to further inform what is occurring so that we can better tailor the changes in care to the data that hopefully we generate faster. And I'm going to cheat. I've got one more real quick that I'm really excited about. Is for the lung transplant initiative, we had an initial call with the FDA, and we will be planning an FDA workshop later in the year to really start to talk about therapeutics for lung transplant recipients.
It's great. Thank you, guys. All right, we're going to dive into these questions now, and I would say let's give the answer that gives the answer, but we don't have to go super in deep. That way we can get lots of questions. Does that make sense? So, Dara, I'm going to actually maybe start with this one for you. It says, what's the latest on the bionic pancreas?
Ooh, this is exciting. So the bionic pancreas is as cool as it sounds. It is a continuous glucose monitoring device that also can provide insulin. And what is great about this is we do have current pumps right now, but you have to put in when you eat, how much you eat, and it can be a little difficult to manage. This has some incredible intelligence, so you don't have to do that entry. It'll just know when you need to have that insulin, and it will continue to monitor you. So it really is a bionic pancreas. The trial in CF is going to be getting started very soon, so keep a lookout on that trials finder for your potential chance to enroll in the study.
Yes. Steve, I'm going to ask you one which said, you mentioned about this company that's developing something that will disrupt the biofilm layer. Climatics. Would this actually help with sort of the people who are having difficulty with difficult to treat infections or drug resistance, or what would be the impact if we could actually find a biofilm?
Yeah, the potential's pretty strong, and that's why we're investing in it. The biofilm serves as a couple things. Number one is it makes the bacteria really, really sticky. And it sticks to the infected CF lung and doesn't go away. So even though you kill some bacteria around it with an antibiotic or with an inhaled Toby, there's some that are protected by that shell. So by breaking up that shell, then the normal antibiotics can get there and you can get better. So it can make normal antibiotics work a lot better. That's one. And then second is, what happens in CF infections is we knock back those bacteria that can be accessed way down. But then those ones that are deep in that shell then accumulate over time and cause the next infection. And so the idea is that we can break up that cycle and ultimately have fewer infections over time, or in some people, where the biofilm isn't so much, switch them from people that have not been able to eradicate that bacteria with a highly active CFTR modulator to somebody that can. So those are the two that make it principally exciting for us.
Great. And I'm going to actually stay on this theme a little bit because there's a question, and maybe, I don't know if Al, you want to jump in this, or for anybody. It says, when a patient has cultured pseudomonas for many years, actually they said 20 plus years in the question, but is now only culturing normal flora after starting Trikafta, where'd the bacteria go? Is it, the question is, is it considered gone, or what's the, how would you assess that?
It's an amazing, what an amazing thing, right? When I started in CF, it was considered not possible to eradicate pseudomonas once it had been there about a year, period. That era is now different. We learned with Trikafta, with the CF-funded and led study called GOLD that I was really proud to be associated with, and with a huge team of people. We found that about a third of the people with CF dropped from chronically infecting pseudomonas to something like what this writer experienced, where the bacteria wasn't present and only normal flora was in. We've seen that same thing happen with Trikafta, but we're learning more. So now, as part of the PROMISE study, which was also a CFF-led post-approval study, where a few gracious people with CF volunteered to have bronchoscopy. And what Dr. Pradeep Singh and his colleagues found was that even people that have the normal flora, many of them, if you go deep into the lung, and not just what they cough up, there's actually still bacteria there. So my quick answer is, it depends on the person. But many people still have the bacteria there, but they're being beat down by our natural defenses that CFTR modulators have helped to not have so much that you cough it up and bring it up. That has got to be a good thing. But the game isn't over. We want it gone completely.
Yeah, perfect. That is progress. Al, I'm going to ask you one about, people have asked about the effect of Trikafta on growth. There's actually one person who asked, is there a concern that the Trikafta may actually slow growth down or gain? I don't know, can you talk a little bit about sort of the nutrition and growth around Trikafta?
Yes. So we do know for many people, it has resulted in growth in terms of weight gain, girth.
That type of growth.
Not for everyone, but for many, which it certainly has us thinking about, again, how to monitor things that we actually never thought might be important in CF, such as lipid panels, high cholesterols, and so on. So we did actually put out a guidance document about a year or so ago with advice around proper nutritional actions for people with cystic fibrosis. So that's one aspect. The other that's always been very important, and certainly for me as a pediatrician, has been in terms of height. And people with CF, even when BMIs or the nutritional status overall seem to be normal, people with CF tend to be shorter. And that's been something that's been actually an area of active research, some of your colleagues, Steve, at UAB. What we are seeing from the registry data may suggest that we could see some increase in height. That isn't clear yet, it isn't certain. We have to also look at the velocity of increases in height. So we're starting to look at that data within the registry itself, but there may be some improvement that we may see longer term.
Let me add one thing, because I'm looking at Bonnie Ramsey here, who's been helping to lead our BEGIN study. And this is specifically designed to better understand when you use highly effective modulators like Trikafta early in life. So this was, I think, a head study. We actually started out by collecting data before that drug was available to young children. And now that it is increasingly available, we're going to actually see what is that effect. I think the specific question here is, can Trikafta decrease height? I think there's no evidence for that. We're actually hopeful the other way around. But we'll know a lot more. Maybe Bonnie will invite you back when we have some of all those answers. But this is remember I discussed earlier about this whole idea of treating earlier to change this disease. We think about lung disease. We think about the pancreas, right? There's growing evidence that treating early in the first couple of years of life, people's pancreases are being rescued, right? And maybe not needing to be on enzymes, but we want to understand the growth part. We understand how the infection is affected. This is a brave new world. It's an exciting new world on that front. Actually, I'm going to ask Dara, one of you started to mention this, but somebody said, I have a loved one who may be interested in participating in some of these trials. How do they learn more? How do they get connected?
Well, we have a handy-dandy CF Trials Finder. You can go to cff.org to find this, and it's very easy. You can search for topics, or you can search for a specific disease. There's a search bar, and it'll bring up the study, give you a little bit of a detail about what the study is about, who's it's enrolling, and then you can even go into the study and look at what sites are enrolling. And from there, you can have a Contact Now button and get in touch with a research coordinator. Super easy. So I suggest everybody, if you're thinking about joining a clinical trial, and we really appreciate your support, this is how we advance our science, go to that trial finder and see if there's something there for you.
That's great, thank you. This is going to be actually for all of us. It says, please discuss CF liver disease. It's still the wild, wild west out there. And I think there's the science part, and there's also the care part. And so, I don't know, Al, are you able to talk a little bit about some of the standardization of care around liver disease, more on the care side, or sort of what we've been doing on that, and then we can talk a little bit more about some of the science.
Well, in fact, there were guidelines published within the last 2 years, I believe, based on the available data that is out there, including there was a study, it was called the PUSH study, looking at ultrasound examinations in people with CF and assessing for liver disease. And we did find, actually the investigators found, that in point of fact, ultrasound can provide important data that helps understand degree of liver disease. There have been additional tests, such as trying to measure the elasticity of the liver, also to help us understand those who are at risk for further advancement of their underlying liver disease. So that is all work that is moving forward and increasing our understanding. It's always been difficult because liver disease is often very diffuse. So even sometimes when you think about a biopsy as a gold standard for doing things, with liver disease, it can be very, very difficult in identifying the correct area and understanding that. And then one of the other things I'll just say real quickly is that it does seem that the liver disease is associated with a vasculitis, or a disease of the blood vessels of the liver, as opposed to just necessarily what at least I often thought of, was the sludging involved in the biliary tract. So it's fairly complicated, and we're still working our way through that.
I might add a little bit on one thing, and I know if you guys want to. So actually, I was going to highlight what you said. I think we're starting to gain some additional understanding about the CF liver disease part as not being this biliary sludging. That was what we always taught. As a matter of fact, many of your family members may have taken ursodiol or other things which sort of help thin out bile secretions, and now there's evidence that, hey, maybe that's not exactly the underlying cause of this, that there may be some vascular issues. What we're trying to do is, this is a tough problem, and I know it's an important problem for many people, so we've been trying to build a cadre of experts, including now recruiting a core group of people who really, that's their thing, CF liver disease. And we want them to help lead some of this research going forward. I think the other part on this is that there's the part once you have cirrhosis, that's almost sort of a little different. Once you have cirrhosis, it's more of the cirrhosis challenge than actually being a CF issue. So we're trying to develop some of those care guidelines and say, okay, what do we do for cirrhosis? That's something that applies for everybody with advanced lung disease, not just CF. Better understanding some of the liver disease, get the best group of people to help us with this. I know it's an area of importance. It's an area we have some work to do. I don't know if there's any of you guys want to add anything else, or is that?
I'd just say one other thing that we know plagues people with CF on a regular basis is this dichotomy between, is it my drug?
Yeah,
is it Trikafta? Or the CFTR modulator I'm taking, or is it my CF liver disease with liver tests? And this is a tricky one. It's tricky because we know that CF liver disease will make your liver tests go up and down. It fluctuates. It can be normal many days in a row, and then it can go up for reasons we don't fully understand, or when something else bad happens, like if you need IV antibiotics, or if you go into a CF pulmonary exacerbation, actually it'll make your liver tests go up even for no other reason that we don't fully understand. It's probably linked into how your CFTR function is doing at that moment and how much mucus you're making, et cetera, even in other organs. At the same time, we've got these amazing medicines, and sometimes they make your liver tests go up. And sometimes that's because of the medicine. It's really rare, but it does happen. And it's idiosyncratic, meaning it's kind of random. You can't predict who's going to have that and who's not. And we're taught as doctors, right? First, do no harm. First, protect the patient. Don't do anything that'll make things worse. And this is a really tough one because you know what amazing benefit these medicines can have. And in many cases, they will make that liver sludging or other parts of the CFTR problem get better, yet it also has this risk of making the liver tests go up. So it results in some really tough clinical decisions. Which one is it? What's the timing? What else is going on? And also what we can say here is that we know there's a problem. It's a very challenging problem. It results in people having to go on and off modulators, and that's really the best we can do right now. But the sorts of technologies that are being developed going forward across the medical community that we expect to be able to take advantage at the right moment is that there are new technologies like liver in a dish, like organ on a chip, where you can take liver cells, grow them in a dish, and then use the medicine on the side and see, okay, is that hurting the liver cells or not in that person, or in somebody with cells like that person, to do a better job of helping you and your doctor decide, is it time to stop, or do we keep pushing on? Is it the medicine, or is it the liver disease? And so look for that to be coming, although this is one where we're really helping and not leading, because it's complicated and it impacts many, many medicines.
Yeah, that's a great overview. And the last thing I say, I know this doesn't help for people who already have existing liver disease, but we're going to learn a lot with treating early. We talked about preventing problems, right? We're going to actually see, okay, what happens when we treat early with Trikafta or other modulators like that? Are we able to influence the development of liver disease? Those are studies that are going on as we follow young people. This one here says, what research in the foundation supporting to look at Trikafta and mental health? So you've hinted at a little bit of this. You're going to go down again. It's ranked #1 of all the questions right now. So,
wow. Yes, it is. It's a very important question to the community as well as myself. And we're going to really try to tackle this and get some answers. Anna Georgiopoulos did the plenary last year, and she talked about mental health. And I hope you took away from that just how complicated it can be to study mental health, particularly with someone with CF, and then all of the medications they're on, throw in a pandemic. It's been very complicated. But I hope you feel rest assured that we are going to be looking at this. We have projects right now that are trying to understand CFTR in the brain, which we haven't really looked at before, and other projects that are looking at drug-to-drug interactions and other things that, confounders, like somebody who may have had a little bit of depression or mood disorders previously, how did that change when they started ATI? So it's gonna take time to get answers, unfortunately, but we are very much working on that and have prioritized that as a question in mental health.
Thank you, Dara.
I think it's just important to add as well, for those who do feel that they're having this sort of adverse effect, to please talk to your care teams. Sometimes we hear stories of people adjusting their doses of Trikafta on their own, and that may not be constructive. And so it's very important to have these conversations, open conversations with your care teams.
One of the reasons this is really so challenging, and I remember it coming up for people with CF that I took care of, is that we're also on this era where mental health in the United States and in the globe is an enormous rise. And there's many, many reasons for it. The stress of the COVID pandemic and all the changes that have happened with that. These darn phones that we all carry in our pocket and the deleterious effects it's having on young children that we have to be careful of. And that times with what happened with Trikafta. And there is an enormous, for people with CF, what we would call in the medical research community attribution bias, meaning it's such a phenomenal event. There's some people that can say, I took Trikafta on this date and it's 5 years ago or whatever. And it's natural to then associate everything that happened to you with that moment. And I think that is also a layer of this. So this is really why what Al said is really important, is that you got to work with your physician to help you see the bigger picture and be just a little bit divorced from that decision making, because it may not always be the medicine. There's reason to believe that in some cases it could be the medicine, but there's so many other things that are inducing mental health problems in the United States and in the globe that you just have to be really careful and thoughtful with your physician to make those decisions.
Yeah, there's a way to help tease that out. Exactly, that's really well said. Al, got one for you, which talks about lung transplantation outcomes are way bigger than just CF. Are we actually able to, the specific question is, do you think we can actually make a difference in lung transplant outcomes as the CF Foundation?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay, good. Yeah.
No, one of the most gratifying things for me with this initiative has been the lung transplant community itself. They have deep respect for the CF Foundation. They feel that, in fact, our involvement has changed the entire tenor around the community itself, in terms of their ability to collaborate on multi-center research studies. Actually, it's changed so much that we really have gone from famine to feast in terms of these multi-center studies. I alluded to, in fact, how important it was for these centers in the collaborative to be ready to work together, because the transplant literature was just replete with single-center studies that always ended the same way. And these results must be validated in a larger, randomized, multi-center study. Well, we wanted to move on from that, and I think our reputation, as well as our commitment that has been very clear to the transplant community, has brought together all sorts of consortiums now, including a couple from the NIH, where in the next year, two different interventions will be tested in large randomized placebo-controlled trials. So I think we've already made a difference, and I'm looking forward that with the expertise we've developed in developing CF drugs, that holding an FDA workshop, for instance, working with the NIH, that we can continue to make a difference in transplant.
That's great. Thank you. Actually, definitely punching above our weight on that one. Punching above our weight on the lung transplant part. I think we're one of the largest funders of lung transplant research right now, right behind the NIH. Steve, I have one for you, although I'm starting to wonder if Dr. J.P. Clancy put this question in. That it says, really excited about the promising genetic therapies, but we're talking about doing trials in very small numbers of people. How are we going to actually do that?
Yeah, it's one of the biggest challenges that we've got in trying to move these treatments forward. So, number one is we're really trying to engage the community in a new way. We need your help, because you have your eyes on the community and have the ties that we don't necessarily have. And we're trying to engage those individuals that sometimes feel left behind and maybe even feel isolated, or maybe even feel like, I don't want to deal with this community anymore. They're talking about things that aren't relevant to me. And so we need them. We need them, and we want to help them. And we need your help in bringing them back to the fore. And we're trying to engage them in new ways, like a study that we've designed and will lead called the REACH study that you'll hear about more in the future, that's specifically designed for people that don't have modulator therapy to understand their disease, and then also get them ready to do the studies that will result in hopefully the ultimate approval of new genetic medicine. So we're engaging in this new way, and we'd like to expand our efforts in that regard, including tapping into communities that might otherwise not have been recognized, like we heard about with Hispanic people in CF yesterday, or other people of color. The second is that we're going to need new endpoints. New trial endpoints. Sweat chloride has served us extremely well in the CFTR modulator era. It helped us pick the right dose. It helped us pick the right population. It did all these things that helped shortcut clinical trial design and ultimately approval timelines. We're going to need those sorts of endpoints for genetic therapy, and they're still evolving because we're newly into the genetic era of the lung. So we're working hard to help work with academic teams that are developing new endpoints in that regard, and also interacting with the FDA. And the third would be thinking about with our regulatory experts, both at the TDN, along with Mary Dwight and her team that are working with government regulators to help generate paths that are not the same as the trial designs of 1,000 patients like was done for Trikafta, which can't be done for these genetic therapies, yet we know we need to get to improve. Well, the good news is the FDA is open to those possibilities if you can help them understand the need, and you have other markers. We've seen very small studies result in approved medicines in the genetic era, but you have to do them smartly and you have to do them well. We don't want to make a mistake in getting a therapy that doesn't work out to people with CF. That is not our business. Our business is to develop transformative therapies and make them available as fast as possible. So we have to be really uniquely well-suited to that, and those are the three paths that we're taking.
Great, thank you. All right, we're down to our last 10 minutes. Katie Area has a question. I thought it was a good one. It says, now that there are so many more CF pregnancies, can you talk about the research into the effects of pregnancies on mothers with CF, effects on their babies, particularly of CF therapies in utero, those type of things? Dara, any ideas about this?
Yeah. So I mentioned when I was speaking about the study called Mayflowers. And this study was really quick and got in ahead of before Trikafta. So we were able to catch a lot of those that may become pregnant on Trikafta, because we did have that baby boom, and a lot of that was unexpected, we got a lot of what it looked like before they got pregnant. And then this study is going to follow them throughout their pregnancy and look at health outcomes of the lungs, but not just that, also looking at how their blood sugars may change, how the levels of Trikafta in their blood may change during pregnancy. And this study actually enrolled very quickly because of all of the great wonderful news of having so many new babies after Trikafta, but it's going to take time for the results of those studies, which I'm hoping will come out within the next few years. I also want to mention that study does follow the infants, the babies that are born right after, so we were able to capture some outcome measures of those newly born children from the parents with CF. So stay tuned, more information to come on that.
Fascinating. I mean, it's amazing. Some of the exposure to the effective therapies in utero can make such a difference, right? We're going to learn a lot about that one. I'm going to ask this one to you, Al, because I love this question in some ways. They say, I love that we're looking at the frequency of care for possibly creating a smaller burden for patients, but I'm wondering what that means for the future of our care teams. Will there be enough work for them to have full-time positions if they aren't seeing patients as often? How do we keep the quality of care team staff?
So I missed the last part.
How do we keep up the great quality of the care team staff?
Yes. So it's a great question, and one we are looking at. We believe, and in fact, actually, many of you may know Dr. Patrick Flume. He's one of the leads on these position papers that I refer to, the guidance documents. And he started when the group was all together with a very provocative question. Do we still need CF care teams? And the answer was obviously yes. It was just being provocative. People with CF will continue to have needs that will be best addressed by an interdisciplinary, because it's still, as we all know and continue to hear, multiple organs, multiple potential complications, who are specialized in CF. It's a rare disease. It'd be very hard for generalists to fully comprehend and be familiar with all the complications. So we plan to be around and continue to support the care teams. They themselves, we have provided, under Bruce's leadership, different tools to strengthen their case, their business model case to their institutions, and understanding that they bring strengths to their respective institutions for what they do. So that's one aspect of making sure they remain strong. Obviously, the other aspect continues to be our support of those teams. We need to, again, understand exactly what people with CF need and what the structure of the team should look like that we continue to support. And that's all work that is in progress, and we'll understand better over the next couple of years. You know, Trikafta is relatively new. We're still learning about what those longer term impacts are. But our support and clearly the need for people with CF to have that specialized care is very clear, and we plan to continue to support that.
Absolutely. And I also say we're actually working hard. We didn't talk about quite as much, but working hard on making sure we continue to recruit the doctors and nurses and care teams of tomorrow. So many programs, career development programs, bringing people to NACFC. You know that once people get exposed to CF, they fall in love, right? Because they know, they see the community, they see the chance to have impact. They're
it's major. It's
inspired to meet families and patients. So we were all in on that. Steve, I'm going to ask you basically a simplify question, which is, it says there's been research that suggests that maybe some of the mucociliary clearance medications, hypertonic saline, pulmozyme, might not be quite as necessary once you're on Trikafta. How should we approach this for patients on Trikafta if they're not sure if they need it, and what should the approach be?
Yeah, we're in the early research of that, but one of the things that was performed by David Nichols and colleagues, who obviously is as part of our care team and the foundation throughout the network, is just to look to see is it safe for people with highly effective CFTR modulator take a pause on their therapies, like hypertonic saline, like pulmozyme. And what the study showed was that for short durations, in appropriately selected individuals who were otherwise doing well, so 3 big caveats, that it looked like for that period of time that people's lung function did fine. People's lung function did fine. So what we are beginning to glean is if we can pick the right people who aren't making so much mucus, who don't have so much infection, who aren't having frequent exacerbations otherwise, that it may be very well safe to start pulling back on some of these medicines. But there's a couple really important caveats. Number one is how selective those studies were. There was only the right people in the right circumstances. We were quite cautious about that. The second is that longer term doesn't mean is different than short term. And we know, for example, even rates of decline changed with things like pulmozyme in ways that we didn't foresee when we just studied it for 6 months or 12 months. It was not until 5 years of experience that you saw that the rates of decline were being affected. And so I think we're kind of heading cautiously in this direction to help identify for people with CF where it's okay to withdraw. I'll tell you, if I look ahead to the future and had to make a guess, this is a guess, is that many people who start modulator early and maintain a healthy lung will be able to stop taking these medicines, but then have them at the ready to use them when they get the cold or when they get the infection to prevent further damage. And that could be a future state that we're hoping for.
If I can just jump in, we did recently release a request for applications for additional studies that build on the success of Simplify. Before we created this request for applications for researchers to pitch their studies, we actually went to our community members and we said, what is the data you want to see to help you have these conversations with your providers so you can have better informed decision making when you're deciding to try to cut back or maybe switch up things in your daily routine. So those research projects are currently under review, but they're going to be looking at topics that are really important to people with CF. Like Steve just mentioned, can we do kind of a as-needed approach to some of these inhaled antibiotics? The other question that was raised by the community was, can we do exercise instead of that loud, annoying vest, right? So I'm really excited to see where these studies go, and pay attention because we will be recruiting, so we're gonna need folks like you to join these studies, but we're gonna learn a lot more about how we can adjust our daily routines and make it less burdensome for people with CF.
That's great. We're down to 1 minute and 22 seconds, so I'm gonna ask a couple of questions. I want one-line answers, or two-line answers maybe. So what's the criteria for advanced lung disease?
I'm sorry,
what's the criteria for advanced lung disease?
It's an FEV1 less than 40% predicted, and potentially other things like whether you need supplemental oxygen.
Got it. So less than 40% or on oxygen. This is one maybe I'll take. It just said, does Trikafta have the ability to rescue the male reproductive system? If you started that early enough, could men or boys with children eventually be able to have children without assistance or naturally? I think that vas deferens effect is actually really early on in life, probably in utero. So this is something we're going to be looking at, but I think right now it's unrealistic to expect that starting Trikafta at early ages would reverse the vas deferens. I think we'll see about that, and we're going to keep going lower and lower, so we're going to learn. But it's a little different. We think it's probably more affected earlier in life than it is the pancreas. We think the pancreas could get more rescued. Let's see, only 15 seconds left. You know what, let's just call it. That's great, thanks. Thank you very much.